Hey guys, Colin, Sarah Myers. I just wanted to make a quick video on Cora. I don't know if you ever heard, or maybe you have heard. Cora had a pretty hard experience. We found her at the bottom of a swimming pool, and we just wanted to talk about what happened, the important things that came about it, and to help create some awareness of um, drowning and kids falling into pools and things like that. Um, so I guess we'll just start with just kind of lay out the day.
Sure.
All right, so we were house sitting for a person, and they had a pool, and we had been in this pool a couple times before this, and we had gotten out of the pool for what was going to be, we were done for the day, and we were just playing around in the driveway. It was a big driveway. We had toys and things like that, and we have two older daughters as well, and we decided one of them said, "Oh, we're gonna go back in the pool," and I said, "No, we're done with the pool for the day, and we're not gonna go swimming anymore." Well, at some point they got out of my line of sight, and they had went up on the deck. It was a raised up, or a deck that was up above by a above ground pool, and they had unlatched the gate, and at some point Cora.
So the gate, or it looked like it was shut.
I know. Well, okay. When we were done swimming, I know for 100%. I closed the gate. If there's cameras, I know I closed the gate. I latched the gate for sure. I know I did because I wanted to make sure something like this wouldn't happen. But like I said, at some point, and I'm not blaming our kids, but it's just the truth. At some point, one of our other kids.
So someone unlatched the gate but didn't push it open. So it looked like it was still latched. So it looked like.
No, it was just open.
Well, no, you didn't see when Cora went in. Like
Yeah.
the gate was shut, but she pushed the gate open.
But anyway, so she got out of our line of sight. The other two came back, and I had a "Where's Cora" moment. We always have those moments because Cora tends to wander. So I said, "Oh, where's Cora?" And so immediately started going towards the pool because that was my first area that I, was most concerned about. And went up on the deck. I had my middle child with me, and we got up on the deck, and my daughter had said, "Oh my gosh, she's at the bottom of the pool," and I froze for a second, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Jumped down into the pool, grabbed her. I pulled her out. I laid her on the deck. Immediately screamed for Sarah. Sarah was kind of on the other side of the house. Sarah came running over. I immediately started doing CPR. I don't know CPR, so I just did what I knew to do. And luckily it was working. Sarah immediately called 911. Some cops showed up. Some other lady that was an EMT showed up probably about within a minute.
Okay, but wait a second. So what happened was I called the police. I was on the phone with 911. They instructed me on how to do CPR, but I wasn't even relaying the information to Colin because I couldn't talk.
She was pretty hysterical.
So the guy, I was listening to what he was saying on the phone, and Colin was just doing it. It was crazy. It was like the guy was talking to Colin, but he wasn't. Colin couldn't hear him. So that was a miracle in and of itself. And so Colin was doing CPR, and the guy on the phone said, "Can you find a pulse?" And so I was trying to find a pulse while Colin was doing CPR. I could not find a pulse.
I tried to check under her jaw for a pulse too.
I tried her wrist and by her foot, and I couldn't find one. And so I started screaming again. Of course, I was hysterical, so I don't know. I could have missed it.
And I don't even know if I was, but.
But anyways, so you were doing CPR.
Doing CPR. When we pulled her out, she was purple. I mean, her whole body was purple.
She had like no movement at all. Like
There's
when I was picking up her wrist and her foot to try to find a pulse.
Just completely limp.
Just completely like no movement. Her eyes were rolled back. Well, her eyes were closed at first.
Yeah.
And then like she kind of started to open them, but they were completely rolled back.
So then started doing CPR, or we're doing CPR. Eventually, I was able to get her to puke, which is gross, and I'm sorry if you can't take this stuff, but she eventually puked. I continued doing CPR, just so we could get all the fluids out and get air into her lungs.
So that was about 3 minutes.
It was probably about 3 minutes. So I believe she was underwater for at least a minute and a half to maybe like 2.5 minutes without oxygen. And then I got her out of the water, applied CPR for probably about a minute, got her, I wouldn't say she was really breathing strong, but she at least coughed the water out and it was like almost like a rebirth. Like when a baby's born, you have to get all the water out of the fluid.
But she wasn't crying.
She cried right away.
Did she?
Because the cops had showed up, and while this had happened, after she puked, and then she started crying.
But not hard.
But no, she was like a whiny.
whimper.
It was like a whiny cry. EMTs and all that showed up immediately. Started asking questions. I was answering them to the best of my ability. We got her on a stretcher. They called for the helicopter immediately. They picked Sarah. Sarah went with Cora in the helicopter. They picked him up at a nearby field.
So in the ambulance ride, we were trying to get Cora to respond to something. And so I was tickling her feet. We were like rubbing her arms. And Cora was having no response at all. So she wasn't twitching. She wasn't like cringing, like, oh, that was ticklish or anything like that. Like she had absolutely no response. She was just staring blankly and no movement. When they tried to like pick her up, she couldn't hold her head up. I mean, she wasn't talking. She was doing nothing. Like we were trying to get her to say our dog's name. Like the lady in the ambulance was showing her pictures of her dogs, and coincidentally her dog's name was Belle, and so I was telling Cora, I'm like, oh, what does mommy call you? And we were just trying to get her to talk or have some emotion or have some kind of reflex or anything, which was non-existent at that point. And then we had to wait for the helicopter. The helicopter was actually out on another run. And so the helicopter got there a few minutes later after we arrived in the field. And we got in the helicopter.
Before we go too far, I want to go back to, the whole deck scene. We were on the pool deck, and that was what happened. So that was just from looking at it from the outside. So looking on my eyes, there's a couple things that happened that were very crucial into her being alive. You could argue with me all day long. I don't care. I know what happened and how it happened. So when I pulled her out of the water, I told her, it started immediately saying over her body that she was going to live. And I didn't say it in a way that was I was desperate. It was more in a boldness way that I knew it was going to be that way. And I kept telling her she's going to live, she's going to be fine.
You kept saying, Cora, look at me, you're going to live, you're going to live, you're going to live. And then you kept saying, breathe, Cora, breathe, Cora, breathe.
And then it was weird. It was at one point, before I even started saying all that, it was kind of almost like time stood still. And it's I had a decision where I could either just let her die, or I could, speak the right things over her and speak life into her and tell her she's going to live, she's going to be okay, there's not going to be any problems. And that's what I did. And if it wasn't for, and I say all that to say this, is that if it wasn't for the local church the church that we grew up in, the church that me and my wife attend, the church that we've sat under for our pastor for 10 years plus, if it wasn't for learning the things that we learned and learning how to say the right things at the right time and to have the right reactions, my daughter would not be alive with us today. She would be dead, and we would have had to plan a funeral and all that. And I don't want to ever have to think about that. But I will say that if it was not for my church, my pastor, it's not the man, it's just him obeying God and teaching us the right things and the right reactions to instances that happen to your life, to trials that happen to your life, my daughter would not be here today. And on top of all of that, all the people that were praying after they found out about the situation.
Well, even before they found out.
Yeah, we actually had one church member who lived on the road that the house we were at. They saw like the cops going by super fast, and the wife turned and looked at the husband and said, I don't know who that is for, but I know we know the person, and we need to start praying right now. And they did. They didn't know the situation. They didn't know who it was, what it was for. They just obeyed God and started praying. And I believe that added a ton to her recovery and exactly how she is today and being alive.
Because, I think we both agree that we aren't medical doctors or anything like that, but I would say Cora was dead.
She had no sign of life at all. There was no way.
When we found her. So, it really truly was like, it was a second birth. Like, she came back alive.
Yeah. So, back to the helicopter. So, you got picked up in the field.
Yeah, and then we started our flight. They just gave Cora an IV and some nausea medicine to try to get her to stop puking. They told me, they were prepping me, telling me that they were going to intubate her, and that that was to try to help her esophagus or something like that. I don't know, just to protect her from maybe puking and getting more in her lungs, or I don't really honestly understand or know all of that, but so they were prepping me for that. Well, then she fell asleep in the helicopter ride, and then she woke up and we were just about ready to land, and her blood pressure dropped, and she started puking again, and she turned super white again, and they just started running with her in the stretcher, and it was seriously like a movie. All of the doctors came running out, and a big team of nurses and stuff met us there, and just asking me questions, and they thought that she had fallen in a pond, or I don't know, but so they did x-rays and all of that. They got her stable again, and I think then after they did their initial, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, they brought us up to the PICU, and all of the nurses and doctors and everything there were super great.
So meanwhile,
and Cora never bottomed out again like that, thank God.
Meanwhile,
and they did not intubate her. They just didn't. I don't know why. The people in the helicopter were prepping me for all of these things and how they were going to put a tube in her mouth and all of this stuff, but none of that happened.
So they flew her an hour
and a half
away from where we live. And so, like I said, Sarah went with Cora in the helicopter, so I was home in our town still. We managed to call my mom, come get the other girls. I made some phone calls to some people, and I had an hour and a half drive there, and that was probably out of the whole experience, it was the hardest for me was because I had an hour and a half drive. I couldn't get a hold of
my. And they shut my phone off.
Yeah, because when you call 911, they shut your phone off for a while. So Sarah couldn't get a hold of me.
I couldn't use my phone at all.
She couldn't use your phone at all.
I couldn't text. I couldn't call. Nothing.
So I had no idea what state Cora was in, how she was, how Sarah was, nothing. And I was able. Finally, somebody called me. It was a lady from the EMT saying that Cora was good. She was a little bit responsive with her eyes and stuff before she left for the hospital or on the helicopter. So that was good. But I had an hour and a half, which ended up being an hour because I was going so fast. But to a children's
when
hospital.
We got up to the PICU, you were pretty much there.
Yeah, I was there by the time they got to the room. And, we started, I started comforting Sarah and answering questions. Somehow I was very, through this whole thing, I was very able to stay calm. But that's by the grace of God, because I was able to answer all the questions, especially when the time was, everything was happening on the pool deck. Like, I was able to answer all the questions. I remembered birthdays and things like that. And I remember the cop asked me, he's like, "Oh, good here." He said to me, "Good job, Dad." And I was like, "He can't, I'm not going to let my child die." Like, and it was just like, I was very, very in a calm state. And, but we got up to the hospital, and even the doctors were like, even that night. So it was just after I got there, she woke up and she started talking, like almost, it's like right after she woke up the one time. Right, it was like right after I got there.
It was a few hours later. They gave us hospital bracelets to match hers, obviously. And ours were blue. And she looked at Colin and she says, "You have a blue bracelet."
And that was like the best thing that could ever happen, hearing the words coming out of her mouth, because like we've heard so many stories and Sarah's had seen stories of children that this had happened to.
And months and months and months have gone by, and the child is still in that state of what she was when she, in the ambulance ride, where they can't move, they can't talk, they can't eat, they can't have any emotion, like they're just, but
like brain
Cora,
dead almost.
yeah, and the one doctor, the respiratory therapist that came in the very first night, the young guy.
Yeah.
At first, I don't know, he didn't really seem concerned at all, really. They were monitoring her for what they call a second drowning, which is when your lungs can fill back up with fluid, almost like a pneumonia, and you could drown from it again. But she had no signs of that.
Her x-rays continually kept getting better. There was still fluid in her lungs, but they said the fluid would just just absorb into her body, so there was no concern for that. But she didn't have, the only thing we came away with from the hospital. So we were in the hospital. It was a Sunday night it happened, and we were out of the hospital by Tuesday evening, which is a bona fide miracle. I mean, I can't tell you how many doctors, nurses, they're like, "This does not happen. Take this as a miracle. Take this as a blessing, because this does not happen. You guys are so incredibly lucky." And we know what they're saying, but we know deep down inside of us, if it wasn't for the people in our church praying, if it wasn't for what we were taught, if it wasn't for our family, everybody just praying for her, and us being in the right church, she would not be alive today.
Even our oldest daughter.
Oh, yeah. She prayed immediately.
Yeah. So he said our middle daughter walked up on the deck, and she's really the first one who spotted Cora. And so she was just screaming. And I really couldn't comfort her because I was on the phone. Colin was doing CPR. And Bria grabbed her hand. And she said, "We gotta calm down, Avery. We just gotta pray." And so she took Avery, and they prayed together for Cora. And that's another thing that we can give credit to God and to our church and for knowing the word and stuff, that Brian knew what to do in that instant, and she just started praying right away. And I mean, I think that was another important part in her story, that her sisters.
And so by the time we were all said and done Tuesday night, you know, like, we literally came home with a cautionary prescription, just so she be.
Well,
that's
because
the only medication
she still had a lot of fluid in her lungs, but she was off of oxygen.
Yep.
So they gave us a script for an antibiotic, just to make sure that fluid, like, she didn't develop pneumonia or an infection from the fluid in her body.
But the fact that that's all we came home with, like, that's it. Like,
yeah, she was.
The hospital we were at was great. They gave her so many things, but we just wanted to make this video to make people aware. Like,
I never thought in a million years that one of our kids would drown. And I've read articles, I've seen things posted on Facebook, on social media. It's like, it's silent, like, you know,
it truly is
happens
silent.
in seconds and all of these things. But I can now say that it does happen really fast. And no, there isn't any sound. Cora did not scream. There was no splashing. The only reason that Colin and Avery went to look for Cora was because Cora gets into things.
Yeah.
It wasn't because they heard her jump in the pool. It wasn't because they heard her scream. It was just.
It's just a crazy thing that has happened, you know, and I mean, we're not the best parents, and I wouldn't say we're the worst parents, but we do our very best to take care of our children, and even the people that try their hardest, things like this happen to.
I think that the big reason we wanted to make a video, if you're still watching this 22 minutes in, is because I don't think people understood what Cora went through, and that she really, from our opinion, was probably dead, and how God changed her story, and that even though we were only in the hospital a couple of days, it wasn't like she swallowed a little bit of water and was coughing. Like, she was gone.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people know that, and I mean, we haven't given a lot of details about Cora until this video, but we just wanted people to know, like, how thankful we are for the prayers, how thankful we are for the support, and how thankful we are that Cora is doing great. There are no long-term effects. She knows exactly what happened. She'll tell you the story. And every time we go to the water now, she looks at me and she says, "Mommy, I'll be safe. I'll be safe, Mommy."
And since then, we've been swimming. She's been swimming. But
yes, she'll go in the water. She has no fear of that.
No fear. And that was important to us, just to make sure that she wasn't going to be afraid of the water, because we always, as a family, we have fun in the water. It's something we love to do. Like, we own our own jet ski, and Cora loves the jet ski, and she would get on it every second she could. So we didn't want to deter that away from her and create a fear factor for water in her life. But honestly, that was, and for us, because, like, we needed to get over it ourselves.
I think it was more so.
It was more her, because she wanted to go swimming when she was in the hospital.
Yeah, she's like, "Can we go back and go swimming?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no. Cora, give me a minute.
But
let me catch my breath here."
That's really, I mean, that's what we wanted to talk about, and
give the glory to God.
Give glory to God. If you're watching this and you're not saved, and you don't know Jesus, and you don't have a local church, go ahead and message us, and we'll definitely go through everything with you, exactly what you need to do.
All you gotta do is pray and believe.
Because honestly, and I'll say it again, every time I tell a story about Cora, I always say this, is that if it wasn't for the church that we go to, it wasn't for God in our lives and being saved,
and knowing God's word, we're not trying to draw attention to our church. We're not trying to draw attention to our pastor. What we're trying to say is that when you're at church and you're learning what the Word of God says and you're applying that in your life, that's what we're getting at.
It's keeping you safe.
It's keeping you safe, yeah.
And you are learning. You don't realize how much you've learned until you're in a situation where it just comes out of you, and you say the right things at the right time. But so, like I said, if you need to get saved or you're not saved and you want to make Jesus the Lord of your life, it's very easy. You can go ahead and message us. We'll go right through it with you. But really, that's all we wanted to talk about tonight and make this video about. And we hope that it brings some light to what drowning how it can happen. And if you haven't taken a CPR class either, take a CPR class. I didn't know CPR. Thankfully, I did it right, and I think that's by the grace of God. But it's definitely on my list of things to do. And I know a ton of other people have told me they want to do it now too, just because of this. So take a CPR class if you can, and we leave some comments below. We'd love to see what you guys have to say, and we hope you guys have a good night.